Suriye'deki olayların perde arkasında ne var? Demokratik reform isteği mi? Uluslararası komplo mu?
Gerçekler artık bu ekranda. Suriye Televizyonu Türkçe haber bülteni yakında Cuma günleri hariç her akşam saat 7.30'da. Sakın kaçırmayın.
Syria declares that the civil Syrian plane forced by the Turkish authorities to land in Ankara carries no weapons or prohibited commodities of any kind. Russia expresses concern over the danger Russian citizens faced when they were held by the Turkish authorities, who prevented Russian diplomats from seeing them. Our armed forces carry out qualitative operations in Aleppo, Homs, Latakia, Al-Raqqa and Damascus suburbs, inflicting heavy losses on terrorists. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our news for today. The Foreign and Expatriates Ministry has affirmed that all the cargo carried on board the Syrian civil plane that was forced by the Turkish authorities to land in Ankara airport were properly registered on the legal shipment policy and the plane's cargo manifesto, and that the plane carried no weapons or prohibited commodities of any kind, in conformity with the internationally recognized good reputation that the Syrian Arab Airlines enjoys. The Syrian government asks the Turkish authorities to ensure the safe return of all the remaining contents of the plane, the Foreign Ministry's statement added. It pointed out that the Turkish government has violated international laws and agreements through militarily forcing the plane to land, despite the captain's refusal to amend the trip's flight course, thus threatening the safety of the plane and the passengers, through the sudden appearance of the military warplanes without justification or previous alarm, not to speak of detaining the civil passengers for long hours and mistreating the crew. The Foreign Ministry said, "This Turkish hostile and repulsive conduct is an additional indicator of the hostile policy pursued by the Erdogan government, if we take into consideration its acts of training terrorists and giving them shelter, and its artillery bombardment of Syrian territories." The Foreign and Expatriates Ministry added in its statement that despite the indicated hostile behavior of the Turkish government, yet Syria still holds on to the friendship relations that bind the Syrian and Turkish people's relations, that are bigger and more important than any government. The Syrian passengers plane Airbus 320 bound to Damascus from Moscow arrived in Damascus at 5:10 a.m. today. The plane had been forced to land in Ankara airport yesterday. Director of the Syrian Arab Airlines establishment, Ghida Abdullatif, said that the Turkish authorities assaulted the crew after the latter refused to sign that the plane was in a case of compulsory landing. Abdullatif added that Turkish F-16 warplanes forced the Syrian plane to land for inspection without notifying its captain in advance. She pointed out that international procedures were not applied and the Turkish civil aviation was not notified in advance, which almost caused a flight accident to happen.
The plane did not carry any illegal material, and the cargo was in conformity with world laws and regulations, in accordance with the legal shipment policy. The passengers were in good health physically, but in a very bad psychological condition. Syrian Airlines establishments will lodge a complaint at the International Aviation and Arab Aviation Federations, as well as at the all international and humanitarian organizations, to protest maltreatment of the crew and the passengers, as it is known that any inspection operation should be usually prepared for in advance.
The Russian Foreign Ministry has expressed concern over jeopardizing the lives of the passengers of the Syrian civil plane, who included 17 Russian nationals, and which was forced to land in Ankara airport yesterday. In a statement, the Russian Foreign Ministry said the Turkish side did not notify the Russian embassy in Ankara about the presence of Russian citizens on board the Syrian plane, and that Russia learned this through electronic media. The Russian Foreign Ministry added that the Russian embassy in Ankara asked the Turkish authorities to allow a meeting with the Russian passengers. Consulate staff and a doctor headed to the airport for this purpose, but the Turkish authorities did not allow them to meet the Russian citizens and did not explain the reason of this conduct, which contravened bilateral consular agreements. The Russian Foreign Ministry said the Russian side insists on receiving clarifications about the causes of such behavior by the Turkish authorities towards the Russian citizens and on taking measures to prevent such incidents from happening again in the future. Within the same context, a top-ranking Russian source at a Russian arms exporting establishment has dismissed as groundless reports about the presence of any kind of weapons or military equipment on board the Syrian passengers plane, which was forced by Turkish warplanes to land on Turkish territories in its trip yesterday bound to Damascus from Moscow. The source added that Russia has not stopped its cooperation with Syria in the field of arms technology and will keep providing it with weapons and any kind of military technology if necessary through legal procedures and not secretly on board a civil mode of transportation. In Aleppo, our armed forces have continued to carry out several qualitative operations in cleaning Aleppo and its suburbs from the mercenary terrorist groups. Our armed forces have carried out a qualitative operation in Dawar Qadi Askar region, Al Ayun Hospital, destroying a motor gun, 6 cars equipped with DShK machine guns, a weapons store and a stolen ambulance full of ammunition and weapons, and killing 3 RPG gunmen and a large number of terrorists. Earlier in Aleppo, army units confronted a terrorist armed group which tried to enter the Grand Umayyad Mosque, killing and wounding dozens of them. An official source affirmed that the news circulated about the incursion of terrorists inside the mosque are baseless and lack all credibility. An armed terrorist group attacked last night a passenger vehicle carrying Syrian workers moments after crossing into Syrian territories. 8 workers were killed and 8 others were wounded, who were carried by ambulances to Al Basel Hospital in Tartus. Dr. Yassin Ibrahim, the general director of Al Basel Hospital, said that 8 bodies arrived into the hospital and were identified. As for the other 8 wounded workers, medical examinations showed that they were suffering from bone injuries due to gunshots. The victims who survived the attack told Sana correspondent that the terrorists kidnapped them and took them to a farm and confiscated all their personal documents. Later, they opened fire at them, killing and wounding dozens. Our armed forces continue to chase armed terrorist groups in Homs and its suburbs, clashing with armed men who are attacking citizens and public properties, in addition to law enforcement troops in Zafarania and Darfur villages, killing and wounding dozens of them. In Latakia, authorities, in cooperation with local residents, confiscated a number of automatic rifles and hand grenades, in addition to highly explosive materials, in a deserted apartment in Ali Jamal Street in the city, which the terrorists used for manufacturing explosives. The terrorist, nicknamed Abu Qatada, has been killed in an operation by our armed forces in Tal Abyad in Raqqa suburbs. Abu Qatada gave fatwas to commit crimes against citizens. Our engineering units have dismantled a number of explosive devices planted by terrorists on the agricultural roads in Zebdeen farms in Damascus suburbs. Moreover, an army unit eliminated an armed terrorist group that spread panic among citizens in Al-Mleha in eastern Ghouta in Damascus suburbs. In the same place, 9 mortar guns were found. A new Russian shipment contained food supplies arrived in Al-Hasaka in order to be distributed to the displaced families who were forced to leave their homes because of terrorist groups. The governor of Al-Hasaka, Khadr al-Hussein, pointed out that the aid shipment indicates the deep friendship ties between Syria and Russia, pointing out that food materials will be distributed in cooperation with the Syrian Red Crescent in the governorate. With this, we conclude our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more news about Syria and the region and to view our bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. And now over to latest business and market news with Khalid Saqabani after a short break. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our news for today. The foreign and expatriates by the Turkish authorities who prevented Russian diplomats from seeing them. Our armed forces carry out qualitative operations in Aleppo, Homs, Latakia, Al-Raqqa and Damascus suburbs, inflicting heavy losses on terrorists.
Türkçe haber bülteni yakında Cuma günleri hariç her akşam saat 7.30'da. Sakın kaçırmayın.
Syria declares that the civil Syrian plane forced by the Turkish authorities to land in Ankara carries no weapons or prohibited commodities of any kind. Russia expresses concern over the danger Russian citizens faced when they were held.
Suriye'deki olayların perde arkasında ne var? Demokratik reform isteği mi? Uluslararası komplo mu?
Gerçekler artık bu ekranda. Suriye televizyonu